This week, Ben and I are going to talk about some foreign trade agreements, along with some escalation in some global politics and other world events, and how that is impacting ag markets. Hello and welcome to the weekly commodity market update. I'm Brownfield's Will Robinson, as always, joined by the University of Missouri's Ben Brown. Ben, how's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you today, Will?
I wouldn't say great, but really good. I'd say really good on this Thanksgiving week. So yeah, can't really
Well, it's nice
complain.
to see you. It's nice to see you haven't blown away.
Yeah. So speaking of getting blown away, Ben, we were talking about this earlier, but been repairing some barn roofs this morning. It gets a little windy up there, and that wind really makes it feel a lot colder than it really is. I think it's in the mid 40s, but it felt pretty chilly. So
Yeah, the wind's just blowing really hard. It makes me feel like I'm back in Kansas.
yeah, well, okay. Speaking of that, my sister, the trader, she and her husband's a K-State grad, so they went to the K-State Cincinnati game
Oh,
over the weekend.
sure.
So yeah, I don't think she's converted to be a K-State cat yet, thank goodness, but it might be coming. I don't know.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good weekend of football.
Yep, very crazy week in football. Well, Ben, I'm gonna give a rundown on the markets. I feel like there's a lot less craziness within the markets, a lot of losses mostly. Looking at that December corn contract down 5 cents at 424, December 25 corn down 9 cents at 432. January 24 soybeans down 24 cents at 985. November soybeans for 2025 down 16 cents at 1010. Soybean oil on a cents per pound basis for December down 4.31 cents per pound at 41.21. Soybean meal in the short ton for December up $3.40 at 293.70. Looking at the nearby wheat contract for December of 2024 down 12 cents at 535. That deferred wheat contract down 9 cents at 572. Cotton for December up 6.58 cents per pound at 73.20. December 2025 cotton up 1.65 cents. Then that West Texas Intermediate crude oil contract down 25 cents per barrel at 68.92. So Ben, quite a few losses spread throughout the board. Really, the only time we saw any gains was looking at cotton and some soybean meal pricing stuff there. So really a kind of a down week heading into the holiday.
Yeah, so two things I point out. First, I'll start with yeah, I guess the wheat complex there. It's kind of amazing to me. I'm shocked. Those aren't strong enough words. Amazed and shocked are not strong enough words for as much escalation we've seen in the Black Sea region this year or past week with Ukraine sending long range U.S. and British missiles or manufactured missiles in Russia countering with a long run or a long range nuclear warhead missile, obviously without the nuclear warhead, but
Yeah.
certainly at least uh, trying to at least I think incite fear, maybe that is a possibility. So certainly, I don't know where this goes, right? Like this has kind of been the thing. We've just become very, immune to and numb to news coming out of this part of the world. It is a big producing area of the global wheat and really feed grains market. And I just don't know this is going to move forward, but it certainly is. It's the markets aren't reacting to it, and as a result, we're just kind of plugging along, and that's kind of that. I don't want to call it a black rhino or black swan because it's not a black swan, but it might be the white rhino. For those that are not familiar with that term, it's the thing that's hanging out there that we know about, but we just kind of ignore. And that could be kind of be just sitting out there. The second thing in this week's price action that I thought was really interesting was the soybean oil market. We're just seeing rapid deterioration in the soybean market. The kind of the sentiment within the market is this is related to a lot of the administration picks we've seen, both leading the EPA over the top of the renewable fuel standard, but then also the nomination for the Treasury Department, which the Treasury Department is the agency that's going to have jurisdiction over the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits, those 45Z tax credits that have really kind of been the driver for a lot of expansion in soybean crush, and then also potential ethanol use in sustainable aviation fuel. So quite a bit of deterioration in that market just because there's kind of a growing concern that we might not see the rules for those tax credits for a few more months.
All right, so Ben, you packed a lot of information within 2.5 minutes or so there. So let's start, I guess, in the Black Sea region, and then we'll kind of move on from there. But looking at the Black Sea region, you talked about the escalation that we saw over the past week or so, but there really wasn't a much of a market response. What do you think it would take for there to be more of a market response? In my mind, I don't see that there would be more until maybe you see more aggression coming out of Russia's side of things, looking at targeting Ukraine and targeting some of these, wheat producing areas. But we go back to this conflict's been going on for so long now that I feel like the wheat market's kind of already stretched to where it doesn't want to go much lower in spite of what's going on.
Yeah, I really don't know. I don't know where we go from this, and I know our listeners don't want to hear somebody say, "I don't know where we go," because that certainly adds, maybe just a recognition of how uncertain some of these markets are, given these global conflicts. Um, I guess, what I would say is I look for this to continue to intensify between now and maybe the end of January. The President-elect Trump has mentioned that he uh, feels that he's able to broker a ceasefire agreement. I think a lot of people believe that that'll mean forcing both parties to the negotiation table. And I think what we're seeing is we're just seeing both sides try to gain leverage ahead of those negotiations. So I don't know where this goes, and
Yeah.
certainly, Will, I would be hesitant. I don't think I'm willing to say that the wheat market's found a bottom. I think we could see, maybe potentially even more deterioration in that market. But certainly, I see your point as well. Like, it's hard to move lower with all this, growing tension, and especially in a large wheat producing area of the world.
Yeah. Well, no matter how low a market gets, it can always go lower, I'm sure. Looking elsewhere within the world, Ben, looking at a new trade agreement between China and Brazil. This seems to be, and this is mostly targeted toward grain sorghum, but it seems to be that, even though this is, not a major crop for the U.S., kind of part of that same movement of China targeting Brazil for more ag imports and more ag products rather than dealing maybe with the U.S. And this could be somewhat in relation to looking back at the trade war in the past and then the incoming administration now. So what's your take on what you really see coming out of China when they look at moving towards South America for some of these agricultural products?
Sure. And I don't remember how many weeks or months ago it was that somebody asked us to talk about grain sorghum. This would be a prime topic to talk about, just because I think this will have implications over the long run in terms of U.S. grain sorghum production. Um, I'll mention a couple of stats, and then we can back away from this. So the U.S. is the world's top grain sorghum exporter, uh, and then on the other side of that, China is the world's top importer, by far. And so the two have largely supplied each other. The U.S. has produced the grain sorghum, China has bought the grain sorghum. As a result, to give you an idea of how big the export portfolio is for U.S. grain sorghum producers, we export, about 69 or 70% of our total production in this market. The rest is used for feed in the Southern Plains. Some of it's used for ethanol. And so, it's a heavily dominant export market. And about 98% of what we do export goes to China, right? So not quite all, but there's a couple of
Vast majority. Yeah.
yeah, there's a couple of African countries, sometimes Mexico, that we see some corn or green sorghum exports to, but it's mostly China, right? So we produce, 220 million bushels of grain sorghum. We export 69% of that, or let's just say 210 million bushels, 215 million bushels. In comparison, Brazil produces 173 million bushels of grain sorghum and only exports about 3% of it. So, or 3 million bushels. So not a very big grain sorghum exporting country. However, so I guess on one side, I would say that this probably doesn't have an immediate impact
Mhm.
in trade. However, it could over the long run, because Brazil grows grain sorghum as a winter crop behind soybeans, and that would allow them to expand acreage rather quickly. And so this could over time eat into U.S. grain sorghum. And, and the market will either continue to contract, or we'll see it compete with corn in the feed bunks and other things as it becomes relatively cheap. So
Well, and that's one of those things too, where if it does start to compete with other things, it might weigh on the price of other agricultural products as well. But Ben, looking at sorghum specifically, it's one of those things to where you can't really recreate China's intake in the aggregate, maybe like we could for some other products. So it will be kind of interesting to see if this is a continuing trend, what the sorghum market does longer term. Ben, looking at one of the things I want to briefly touch on today that you spoke about just a little bit is some of the new administration's picks for some of these department heads and other positions. One that we have that is fairly recent is Brooke Rollins as the new agricultural secretary. Really, I don't know too much about Ms. Rollins and potential policies or directions from USDA out of that, but just something to keep in mind and look as you see maybe a shift from Tom Vilsack's USDA to Brooke Rollins' USDA.
yeah, I guess kind of like you, I don't know if I have a whole lot of insights here. I don't know Miss Rollins very well or at all, but I will say that she was an active part of Trump's first administration. She was in the running for chief of staff, and so that tells me that she has a pretty significant voice within the room. She does come from an ag background, Texas A&M roots, so down there, not too far from you there, Will. But I think in general, I think we could expect that she's in a position where she could maybe have some influence for U.S. producers, and U.S. production ag. So that being said, I'm not 100% sure what her positions on a lot of policies are. She doesn't have an overly deep record or public record as it relates to ag issues, and um, we'll see and learn a lot over the next couple of months.
All right. Well, Ben, looking at the rest of this week, this is the Thanksgiving holiday week. What should farmers and ranchers really be paying attention to, outside of maybe some closed markets?
Yeah, so it is Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. It's always a fun time of year. The students are gone today, so it's really quiet on campus. We have some economic data that comes out Wednesday ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday. That'll give us a better indication of like personal consumption and expenditure patterns. So looking forward to that report. We also have next Monday is the start of December, and so we have all of our first month consumption reports, whether grain crushings or fat and oil seeds or cotton systems reports. And so be interested to see just kind of how the trend of consumption has either increased. I expect an increase given our large production and cheaper prices relative to they've been in the last couple of years. So be interested to see some of the demand numbers. And then next Tuesday, we have our jobs opening and turnover report. October was not a pretty month for job creation. There was a lot of job openings to help with hurricane relief. It'll be interesting to see how those change as we move through. So this would be for October. So this would include some of those jobs, I guess is what I should say. So we get better insight into that October jobs report that was pretty dismal, if you remember. So anyways, that's kind of the week. But outside of that, yes, abbreviated trading day on Friday to end the week.
All right. Always good to have your knowledge and information here on the program. Viewers and listeners, if you'd like to learn more about us and what we do, or our sister program, the weekly livestock market update, you can do so at brownfieldagnews.com. Ben, thanks again. I'm Will Robinson on Brownfield.